Hoggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today's question is a rather lengthy one concerning grounding. We'll try to go through it at a pretty sprightly pace here. The question comes from Scott, N3 CRS. He's got all kinds of questions about grounding, and these are in reaction to the May 2022 Ask Dave column in QST. He says, I've read several articles, including this one, that mention running braid from the ground rod to the shack. I'm using number 4 stranded copper jacketed wire. Should I change it to coax braid, as stated in the article? You certainly can if you want to. I happen to use number 6 stranded wire for that, and it works fine. I've not had RFI issues, and when you've got your station to the point where you don't have RFI issues, often it's best to leave well enough alone. But I want to show you. Let's follow this around here to the back of my station, which is going to look like a mess, because it is. I've got it set up here so that all the wires can come out. Now, this is one kind of braid that you can use. Note that this braid, which I think comes from ABR Industries, has these little crimped attachments so you can put it over the screw terminal right there. This is 1-inch braid, and that runs down to my ground. Now, the ground rod itself, because another one of your questions is on this, is just this piece of copper pipe right here. It doesn't need to be real long. It can be that. Now, on some of my other station elements, I have this braid right here, which is made as braid. Both of these are made as braid. Now, the reason this stuff is good for normal RF is because it's got an incredible surface area. Note all the bumps and valleys and every single one little strand like that. The surface area on this is just enormous. Whereas if you use just a standard wire or something, you don't have near the surface area. And we remember that RF travels on the surface. So this gives you a large surface area. You can do it with this braid, you can do it with copper strap, and so on. I like the braid. Now, one problem with the braid is that if it has really high current for any length of time, it can get hot, melt, and actually burn. You wouldn't think of copper, these other things, as burning, but this is tinned copper. But it will. It can burn under certain very rare circumstances. So I have braid running up to my coax switches here. I have it running over here to the amplifier right here, bringing everything together into this one spot right here. This can be the length of the shack, but it doesn't need to be. It can be just like this. Just run these fairly short. The reason this has got some extra in it is so if I pull the radio toward myself, I've got a little bit of slack there. Whereas this is pretty short because this doesn't get moved, okay? And I think that's a pretty good grounding system right there. Now, the braid there is not coax braid. It looks exactly like coax braid, but it's not. A lot of people used to strip braid out of old coax cables and use that. Why not just get new braid? You can get it very, very easily through DX Engineering, HRO, the many other manufacturing retailers, or you can get it straight from like ABR Industries or someplace like that. I would start with DX Engineering and go from there. Now, let's take a look at some of your other questions. There are 3 8-foot ground rods spaced 6 feet apart in a triangle outside my ham shack. That's nice. Bit of overkill, but nice. And they should be bonded together. And it said the first one's about 5 to 6 feet away from the house. They're tied together with the same number of 4 copper wires is okay? Yes. Now, I would recommend when you bond grounds to use bare wire. The code, I believe, calls for number 6 bare copper wire, solid. We can go braided because we want the additional RF stuff. If you run the bonding here stands for connecting ground rods. If you run that wire underground, bare copper, it itself acts as a grounding system. So you'll also run a wire from there all the way over to your utility ground, which would be very near the meter. And you also run it to your antennas if you've got like a tower that's grounded or something like that. I have a step IR, big IR, vertical control boxes right here. That has lots of radials. Radials don't count as ground. They're radials. They're the counterpoise for the antenna. But there's also a ground rod going in the ground. Ideally, that should be bonded with my regular ground. So that is an open issue for me, but that is something that for best practices I should do. Okay, I am on a well system with plastic water piping. Do not have a copper cold water ground. Very few people do these days. Most of the run-in, the connection from the street to your own internal water system is plastic. This house, which was built 20 years ago, has copper piping inside, but the newer houses have plastic piping inside. So none of that is a good ground system because potable water is not a very good conductor of electricity. Salt water is, but we don't drink salt water. Okay, my electrical ground is on the opposite corner of the house, probably 60 feet away. How should I connect the grounds from electrical ground to the shack ground, or should I worry about that? I would worry about that a little bit. Go ahead and connect that. Just go down to Home Depot or Lowe's and get a spool of bare number 6 copper wire and get the appropriate ground clamp connectors, or you can also do the little thermite welding thing if you want to. I don't think we need to go that far, and plus having thermite fires is a little dangerous. And run that under the ground, and then that will also act to help ground things. I don't recommend a insulated wire for that. I recommend a bare wire for that. But that number 6 wire will do it, or if you want to do number 6 stranded, that will do it. The stranded wire will be more expensive. Okay. The big question for me is I hear a lot of people talking about how to terminate the grounds at the shack. As I pointed out over there, all you need is a little copper pipe about this long. If you look in the Motorola book on grounding, it shows a single point ground for all the equipment that actually is a block of copper about like that. And the grounds are run from all the equipment to that, and then that is connected to a rather extensive ground system that completely surrounds the building outside. Okay, so it doesn't have to be the whole thing. I would go ahead and use the braid to ground the things that are on your desk. I like the braid because it just, if there's anything braid there, it's grounding. Okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about that too much. You don't need to use, you say using number 12 stranded copper wire from the plate to each piece of equipment. I think I would go with the braid. The number 12 is probably working well. You mentioned in your article not to solder the connections. Here's what happens if you solder the connections. You can have a piece of wire that doesn't seem all that big. It can carry a very high current for a very short period of time. In fact, the wire may actually get hot so much that it glows for a moment, but these over voltage conditions, these high current conditions, are very short-lived. Okay, so a normal wire can heat up a little bit and then cool right back down because it's so momentary. If, however, you have solder in there as part of the connection, that flash of heat, which won't disturb a normal wire, can, however, cause solder to flash boil, and it can go splattering from there. So don't solder those ground wires, because in the event of a nearby lightning strike or something like that, you could end up with solder spraying around. Solder's great inside the radios. Solder's great for power leads, things like that. But the grounding stuff should be crimped all the way around. Even if it's just a hose clamp, crimping it, but it should be crimped. Okay, you mentioned, see, my antennas are all wire and a couple hundred feet away. It says he has a PVC junction box in the woods. He doesn't talk about grounding that. At the house, the feed lines go directly to the equipment. This is where I would ask you to cut those lines, install connectors, and you've got a ground rod there. Mount your, and there's hardware for this available from like DX Engineering or whoever. Mount the lightning arresters right directly to the ground rods, okay? Then bring your cable up to and connect it to the lightning arrestor, and then from the lightning arrestor, that's where it goes into the house, okay? You want to keep that lightning out of the house, and the lightning arrestor will connect there. There are 3 popular manufacturers. There's Alpha Delta, there's Morgan, there's some others. I like the Alpha Delta because they will pass DC current, which is useful if you're using that for a control system of some kind, like for a tuner. So this is what I would recommend. Go ahead and connect that to your ground rod and have the lightning arrestor there, your cable running through it and going up. Now, if at your junction box out in the woods behind your house, away from the prying eyes of the association police, you can ground that too. And if you've got connectors in there, barrel connectors, ground those barrel connectors together and ground that to that ground rod there. And then you'll want to also bring something back so you can ground that to the house. So there you have it. We've talked about a variety of grounding techniques and things that we use, a little bit of pictures of what I had in the shack and so on. Please be sure to subscribe and click the bell and click like and all of those good things. Please share the video with others. You're welcome to use these videos at your club meetings or anywhere that you would like in a training course, okay? And also, if you would like to help support this channel financially, which enables me to bring you more videos, please take a look at dcastler.com/support to get a few opportunities there to do that. And until we next meet, 73.